Local tax experts are here.
Hello. Hey guys. Hello, every nerd. I hope you guys are well. Thank you, Druid. Um, I'm not at home. I am in my secret villain lair in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. I'm just kidding. I am in the Blue Ridge, but or close to the Blue Ridge, but I am at my husband's childhood home, so we're visiting and helping out his dad. So I think I mentioned this last week. I might be here. So I have a temporary setup. I do have a quilt behind me. it comes with the setup. So hi guys. So Druid's here and Robin and Quiltish. Hi. I think there's a couple more people here. Yeah, I was watching the numbers as I was sitting here, and like I don't know, Twitch does weird things with um, the number of viewers and like who you actually can see. Sometimes I don't think it's very accurate. So anyway, um, so I feel like it has been at least a month since I've seen you guys, and I know it's only been a week. Um, Lots and lots of things. Um, hmm. So I've traveled a bit to be here. And I did a very cool workshop this weekend, an online workshop. So I have some interesting things to tell you about from that, probably on Thursday. Uh, it's Groundhog Day. All the groundhogs saw their shadow, so 6 more weeks of winter. I'm sure nobody is surprised. I see Robin's got. It was warmer in Reno than it was in Miami. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the southern states like really took a beating. Um, and Druid, did you get snow? Um, I'm never really sure as far as geographically, like if you're ever included in our snow. But anyway, like Robin said, I hope you're safe and warm. Everybody, I hope you're safe and warm. The groundhogs obviously wanted to go back inside, so anywho, um, all right. Why don't we just get into it? So today I thought it's February. How did it get to be February? But it's February, so I thought we would look at some African American quilts in honor of Black History Month, and they're all quilts you've seen before. So it's I'm not gonna like spend a whole lot of time, on each, but it'll be nice retrospective of some of the shows I've been to, and some of the quilts that I really liked. So we'll look at those, and then I brought a few quilters newsletters with me, and I found this really, really awesome article, Quilts with a Sense of Humor, and it's written by Barbara Brackman. So I look at the quilts in that. And then I have Elizabeth Robertson intel, and we're going to keep going in her book. So, oh gosh, what have you guys said here? Druid, 5 inches. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you guys are getting the single digits like we are. Oh, and Quiltish has got the negative digits. Oh, you guys, winter's the worst, isn't it? Of course, I know there's people that love to ski and love all the winter sports, but no thanks. I'm all for autumn, as I'm sure I've told you guys so many times before. So, all right, let me just go ahead and pull up. We're going to look at first. Let's see. And these are in no particular order. And make sure. Oh, okay, bear with me a sec. There we go. Okay. I forgot to change my monitors over. Okay. So I hope you guys had a good weekend. Even if it was lousy weather. I guess there's not much you can do when the weather is so crummy, right? It's like unless you are a skier or an ice skater or something like that. I mean, who wants to go outside, right? Yeah, so Druid is saying most severe winter in several years. Yeah, definitely for us, for sure. And then Robin's getting one of the driest starts to winter. Yeah, I mean, this is climate stuff, like all of the weather patterns do weird things and whatnot. And I think if I remember correctly, we at least here, like in the mid-Atlantic, East Coast, where I think we're dealing, it's polar vortex stuff, right? It's coming out of Canada, I think. And then I guess this weekend the snow was a nor'easter, which goes from south to north, right? On the East Coast. Follows 95. Um, yeah, so ugh. All right. Let us look at the quilts. So, like I said, these are in no order. I took them off my phone. I was going through my phone and looking at all of the shows that I've been to, the exhibits I've been to in the past like couple years. So you probably remember this one. And it's an odd picture. I kind of cut the bottom of the quilt off because I wanted to get the this little quote that's up here. And the quote says, "That's the mother of the stars in the center. That's the dipper of the sky. You see the twinkle ones? That's a shooting star that didn't get far away. See his tail?" And of course, this is Elizabeth Talford Scott. This was the 25-year, I guess, anniversary show of her retrospective from 25 years ago. Um, and this was up February before last. So 2024 was when this show was at the Baltimore Museum of Art. And I think this is probably one of my favorite pieces of hers. You guys probably remember it. I think it's called Chinese Cushion. I apologize, I don't have all of the placards. But this one is kind of this, three-dimensional object. I never got to go see its counterpart. If you guys remember in 2024, this Elizabeth Telford Scott like retrospective event included like I think it was eight or nine different galleries and museums throughout Baltimore, and each of them had one piece of Elizabeth Telford Scott's work, and they had it like in conversation or in juxtaposition to a piece in their collection. So this one is, I want to say it's one of like multiples that she made, and the Chinese cushion one, I think was actually at, oh gosh, it's not the Baltimore Museum of Art. It's the other one, the Walters. I think it was at the Walters, but it was similar to this one. And they had it in juxtaposition with an actual, I'm not sure which dynasty it was from, but one of the earlier Chinese dynasties that had made textile goods and things. So I always liked this one. So Jared said it's been too bad for mail run. Oh gosh. Okay, you guys have your law enforcement is saying to stay off the road. Yeah, I get it. There's a lot of that here in our rural areas. I do not remember the name of this one at all. But as I was looking through my pictures, I was just like, I love what she's done with this. So I wanted to look at it again. And if you remember, she literally stitched rocks and like stones onto her quilts. So they're just a feast for the eyes. And, there's stories within these things. This one, I think I've shown this one multiple times. It's called Eyes of the 80s. Is it Eyes of the 80s? And if I remember correctly, this one actually was purchased by her eye doctor because it's got this eye. So still Elizabeth Telford Scott. Very, very cool stuff. I love her work. It's just so much to look at. This is one with all the beads and the buttons. Just, yeah, just stunning. This is a small piece, I think. If I remember well. I mean, you can kind of tell by the size of the buttons, right? that it's fairly small. But she's got, and I'm trying to remember, I feel like there was a story behind the buttons, like where she sourced the buttons from. I could be mixing her up with another artist. This one, I can't zoom in too close to this one. The resolution's not good. I don't know why. I thought all of these pictures were really, the resolution was really good, and it's not on this one. But anyway, these are kind of, I think there's some of them are actually yo-yos, but I also think there's kind of just some ruched fabric in this. So it makes like this big like carpet, and this is pretty big. And I think you can see these little white dots or buttons and beads and things. But it's still, this plinth that it's on is a good size. This one had this apron on it, and these other pieces. I think some of these are um, found textiles that she's used. Oh, it's funny. I'm looking at my two screens, and I can see what you guys see. I think is much brighter than what I'm looking at. So that's probably good. um, my travel screen is not the greatest. Okay, so the one exhibit I did get to, and if you guys remember, the reason why I didn't get to all of the different museums was because right in the middle of this event going on in Baltimore, I went to QuiltCon. That was in Raleigh, year before last, and I came home with COVID. So I didn't get to go to all of the exhibits. I was so mad. But this one was really awesome. This one was at the Maryland Center for History and Culture, and their show was called Material and Memories. And they were looking at crazy quilts. And so Elizabeth Halford's piece here is sort of a crazy quilt-esque. And then members of the African American Quilt Guild of Baltimore were also had a bunch of their work. And they were small pieces, like they were bigger than 8 by 10, most of them, I think. But in any event, there's I don't remember what the call was, what the art call was, but they were showing their pieces in conjunction with this show. So the piece, it's called Abstract Number One, which is the crazy quilt that Elizabeth Halford Scott made. And if y'all remember, I couldn't stand like right in front of it to take a picture because of the gallery is this weird angle. So I had to kind of stand to the side and like sight it down. Um, so you get to see one half of it at a time. But this one, I was really enamored with this. It's using a lot of clothing scraps, household textiles and such. I think this is probably like a bed sheet or a pillowcase. And then here's the other side. Yeah. I mean, you can, as you look at some of these textiles, I mean, you can almost see this stuff, on a bed, somebody's shirt, maybe somebody's coat. Do you ever do that when you look at quilts that were made of scraps? You kind of imagine like that must have been a little girl's dress, right? Or that's a little bit more of a sophisticated print. That was probably women's clothing. I know that some of the like the shirtweight type fabrics that my great grandmother quilted with were sometimes things like pajama pants and boxer shorts. I was horrified to discover that there, I think, is one print in one of her quilts that is 100% like my grandfather's used boxer shorts. All right. Okay. So that's it for Elizabeth Halford Scott. This is in the Smithsonian's the Portrait Gallery. And when I visited there was that this year? This was at the end of 2024, towards the end, when the Pattern in Paradox show was up at the Smithsonian. It was the Amish quilts. And I think they were mostly Midwest Amish quilts. So I went to see that, but they also in the portrait gallery, like the hallway leading into the portrait gallery, they had portraits of women. So it was like a like it wasn't like Women's History Month or anything. So I don't know. It was kind of like just a culling, a pulling together of the women's portraits that are in the portrait gallery. And I absolutely love this one. It is, of course, Bisa Butler. She's a current modern quilter, and the person it depicts is Octavia Spencer, right? Oh shoot, Octavia Butler. Why do I always get the name wrong? She's got the same last name as Bisa, so Octavia Spencer is an actress. I always do that. Anyway, Octavia Butler. She was a science fiction writer. Um, and I think her education, she may have had education in something STEM related. I tend to get people's histories mixed up. I think Carolyn Maslumi has like the rocket science background. I think Octavia Butler had sort of a similar background. I think she had something in the science realm. But I think hopefully the image you guys are seeing is much brighter than what's on my screen, because this is like shocking pink, this background. And what I really loved is in her hair, Bisa used, I think it's probably like a tulle or a netting that was like really heavily glittered. And that's what she used for Octavia Butler's hair. And just fabulous. Oh, there's her signature on her shoulder. um, and I love the fact like what she used this UFO fabric, because Octavia Butler is a science fiction writer. And of the pictures I've seen of Octavia Butler, this is what she looks like. This is a very, Bisa Butler's, and they're not related, by the way. Bisa Butler's quilts they're photographic. Even though they're not photorealistic, they look exactly like the people that they depict. And this is a very small piece too. It's probably, I don't know, 18 by something, 18 by 24 maybe. It's pretty small. Actually, we probably have the dimensions here. No, no dimensions. Okay. Oh, she received a MacArthur Genius Award. I love that. And so Yvonne Wells, this was just last year when I had the honor of going to the International Quilt Museum to work on a project for the American Quilt Study Group. And while it was a group of us, and while we were there, IQM so generously, I mean, they hosted us, and then they so generously said, hey, while you're here, if you guys want to look at some quilts on your break, send us the quilt you want to see that's in the IQM collection, and we'll see what we can do. And I think almost like to the person, they were able to see the quilt they wanted to see, which was really exciting. And I had asked to see Yvonne Wells, one of the Seven Deadly Sins quilts. I think they have all seven of those quilts. And the one I really wanted to see was the one with the donkey, but beggars can't be choosers. So this was the one that they pulled out. But what I love about her work is, I mean, certainly the subject matter is fascinating, but I love to look at the intricacy of her work. And we looked at another piece of Yvonne Wells' work, and I did not put it in here today. I was kind of in a rush, but she includes things consistently in her quilts. It's symbolism. Some of it is about her faith. Some of it is, I'm sure, probably personal to her. But when you look, you can just see these things that pop up over and over again. And when you're utilizing, as an artist, you're utilizing something like that, it becomes your trademark. Like And I don't mean trademark like the legal part of it, but it just becomes like your thing, right? So she puts things in threes for one. So you see three flowers. And from what I understand, if I'm remembering correctly from what I've read, the use of three, she's referencing the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. And so that's with the three birds. And then she has some other stuff with like this. I don't know what this references. And this is terrible for me to admit. I have this wonderful Yvonne Wells book I bought, have not read it. So, oh, sorry guys. If hopefully I didn't make a noise. I'm wearing a different mic today because again, I'm traveling. This is my travel mic. But anyway, I probably within that book, it explains what this thing is, but it's a circle and it has these four little points. And, you know, if I had to guess, they're the cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, but I don't know. I don't know if that's accurate. But it does. It shows up in so many of her quilts. And then the other thing I think is really cool is that she does like her visible tack stitch. And that's here. You can see that visible stitch. It's where she's taken a couple of stitches to tack the end of that stitch line. And you can see it. And, I think that sort of, the master, like artist kind of quilts, they would expect that you don't do things like that. You tie your quilts off in the back and you pop your knots through it and all that stuff. But Yvonne Wells, she shows it all. And I love that. Yeah. And so this is the scales of justice. And then I think most of my other pictures here are, yeah, they're the close-ups. So I'll kind of skip through these quickly. I love just some of the, like these sort of random fabrics and trims and things she uses. You've just got, pieces of this brown rickrack, I think that kind of show up in different places. And I think it's tacked down at the ends, but it's loose. It's not completely stitched down. So kind of, again, it gives like these, they're just these aspects that kind of draw you in. You're like, what is that? What's happening there? And this looks like, I don't know, this looks like it's like off the cuff of something because you've got this like factory serged edge here. I don't think these are too terribly old. I can't remember the dates on these quilts, but I think this series is not terribly old. And of course, Yvonne Wells is still, as far as I know, she's still making quilts. In fact, I think it was fairly recently that Teresa Duryea Wong has done some things with Yvonne Wells. So I love this. You can see her fingernails there. I love it. And then more of the rickrack. Now, the other quilt that we looked at, which I have shown you guys, I know I showed it last year, but it's much more abstract. There's not really any figurative or figural things in it, but it employs at least one, but possibly a pair of like striped gym socks. So you guys know, like the tube socks with the stripes at the top. There's at least one or two in this other quilt, and I just loved it. I love that too. So all of these details I've already showed you. Here she's got four fingers showing. Okay, so this is another Bisa Butler. And this one, I do have the name of this one. This one is I Know Why the Caged Bird Beats His Wings, which, it's a reference to Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And I think the little placard about it explains that. But, this is just another really cool look at the way she uses printed fabric. And in some cases, I think she herself manipulates the fabric, like, with mark making. I don't know, this could be like a batik type fabric, or it could be something that she's created and made. She uses a lot of African wax prints and such, but I do think she does do some fabric manipulation, perhaps, at least in this here, she's got words going around the frame of the quilt or the border of the quilt. Um, so yeah, this one's quite a bit larger than the Octavia Butler quilt. This one is, I would say it's at least maybe 40 inches across. So, and this was part of the show that was at the Renwick Museum last year, and I saw it right before it came down. And it was a collection of quilts that Carolyn Maslumi had put together. And of course, she is a fantastic quilt historian and prolific quilter herself, and also rocket scientist, I think. um, so some of these ladies, make me feel like a big dummy because they're so accomplished. So let's see. This is a portrait of Paul Lawrence Dunbar. He was, let's see, the first public high school for African American students was Dunbar High School. I'm trying to see here. I guess Dunbar was just a poet. Just a poet, but let's see. Research Dunbar's life and photographs. Yeah, I guess he's a poet. Okay. Oh, duh. It says that right in front of his name. Poet, Paul Lawrence Dunbar. So, and I would say, yes. Okay. So Maya Angelou derived the title of her memoir from Dunbar's poem. So it's really Dunbar's words that are why the caged bird sings. So this is Sean Kimber, and she's very well known she does a lot with denim and kind of texture on the front of her quilts. Like sometimes she cuts into the denim and into the fabrics, and it's sort of frayed. This one's got like threads that kind of come away from the intersections. Okay, this one's got pretty decent resolution, we can see. But a lot of her quilts have words on them. So, and I think this one is called Slow Poetry #1. So, and some of her quilts I think are, many of them are social justice oriented. I think several of them are much more in your face than this, but I think this one's really lovely. And then one of my favorite quilts, one of the reasons why I wanted to get to this show was to see Betty Ford Smith's Pinecone quilt, and that's what you see here. I think she worked on this one through COVID. And I heard her speak for the Baltimore Applique Society, of which I'm a member. And, she spoke, at length about how she got her training, how she learned how to make these quilts, but also sort of the changes in her style over the years. And, getting to this point, I think this is like 2022 or 2023 maybe. Oh, it's 2020. My apologies. So this was in the first, I guess, the 6 months during COVID. She made this one, and I remember her saying what she had discovered was, as these, she makes each one, they get more dense and they get heavier. And I think that's so interesting that she's identified how her work has changed in that way. And I think they're just so lovely to look at. And if you weren't around when I showed these before, this technique is not terribly difficult, but it is tedious. And you have to really maintain control of the rings that you're making around. You start in the center and you make the rings around. And all of these things are little they're folded in such a way. You might be familiar with prairie points on a quilt. They're folded and similar to that, and they're laid down and then they're stitched, and then the next row outside covers up like the raw edges of these, so it's just kind of concentric. And she showed photos of working, in her living room, and she has a fairly small living room. Obviously, furniture takes up space. She's got furniture in there, and she still manages to get these things stretched out and to work on them. It was really cool. But I just really love this one, and I remember her saying like she was just pulling all her fabrics, and she kind of has to plan, if she wants to have this complete ring of one particular color, she has to plan it out. Um, so, like I said, it's the technique itself is fairly, I think it's fairly simple for people to pick up when they are sharing how it's done. But it's there's a lot of thought that goes into making this, a lot of planning. That's just a close up. This is by Dr. Myra Brown Green. I think it's my Aquaba form, I think. And this image, this figure is called an Aquaba. And I'm trying to remember the specifics. It's probably in the placard, but I want to say that it's a figure that is related to mothers and children, I believe. And I think she's made a number of quilts that have the Aquaba figure. And I think there's another one I think that is truly representing like her family. But this one is more about, I think it's more of a personal piece. And this is like a close-up of the quilting and the Aquaba's body. And you see she's used the cowrie shells there on its breasts. But the quilting in this is just really cool. There are all of these leaves, and they're not all connected. That's what's really interesting to me. Because typically when you look at, say, you look at somebody who's long-armed, and maybe a leaf design, but it'll do the leaf and then it'll kind of stitch a line to the next thing and then do the figure again and then stitch a line, and this is not how she's done these. She has stitched these leaves individually and ended the quilting and then moved to the next spot, and that's tedious. That's a lot of work. I would just be like, zip on over to the next one. But she is ending her thread and burying it however she buries it. I don't know if she puts them on the back or if she pops them through, but in any event, her quilting is really lovely. So yeah, this is my Aquaba form. Let's see. It's okay. So the Aquaba figure is a Ghanaian symbol of protection of mothers and their children. Yeah. And then this is the border. And again, you can see she's then using multicolored threads, and the quilting is not following the patchwork, the piecing. The quilting is laid over top. It's its own animal. And then this is the last one, and this one like really got me when I saw it. But I'm really obsessed with quilts that are not shaped like quilts. And this is flat, it's not sculptural, but the fact that it's, they've got it hanging in a corner, and it kind of almost takes on this three-dimensional, and it's big. This is not life size. This thing is probably like pretty big. But this one was called, I think it's My Son Could Be Trayvon, I think. Trayvon Could Be My Son. And so this is by Dorothy Bird. And of course, this is relating to Trayvon Martin and his death at the hands of George Zimmerman. But she took a picture of, I believe it's her nephew, her grandnephew or her nephew. So she used a baby picture, and then she added in the tea and the Skittles, and then put him in a sweatshirt with a hood. So it's pretty powerful. And then this is where I took the picture, we kind of see behind it that it is flat. It just kind of curves a little bit because of the way they've hung it, but it is a flat piece. But I loved the way that it created this sort of like three-dimensional. Oh, it's not the last one. I'm sorry. The last one, of course, is Carolyn Maslumi's piece. And these are her sons, I know. And um, I don't know, do I have, yeah, no, I don't have the placard for this, but I remember it talked about like her process. And this is not actually pieced, at least the center portion isn't. What she does is she does a lot of photo manipulation on a computer. And then she has the photo printed out on cotton. So probably something like Spoonflower or, one of those printers that, you can make fabric and get them to print it. She'll get the panel printed, and then she goes in and does all of this quilting. So, I would say as Carolyn Maslumi, I mean, her work is brilliant. And she does a lot of in black and white. I think the other piece that was there was also black and white. Um, but I would say Carolyn she's a surface designer, like a graphic designer in her work. But she doesn't do the piecing. She creates like a whole thing, a whole picture on fabric. And then I think that was the doorbell. And then she quilts it so intricately. I mean, you could see this.
Thanks a lot, Clint. You want to come in? Oh, I'm feeling better now. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that stuff's just not going away yet.
So there's a visitor. I don't know who it is. But I also thought was really interesting about these. And I don't know if it's sort of the foreshortening of the figures in the photo itself, or if she did a little bit of like kind of manipulation. Because, for instance, the baby that's in the wagon, I feel like his head is bigger than his body, and I also feel the child in the front is kind of that way too. So I don't know if it's just like the way the photograph was, because she works off of a photograph, or if she's kind of done that purposefully. But there is something about like their bodies kind of recede and their faces are more prominent than their bodies. So anyway, I love that one. And then this show was called We Gather at the Edge. And of course, this is the last picture because I went through the whole show backwards. um, so, but this talked about, she had, Toni Morrison quote, and yeah, this was a lot of good information about Dr. Maslumi's personal collection and what she has, she's donated to the Renwick's collection. Alrighty, let's go back to me for a minute. So yeah, I was kind of making a list of, prominent Black quilters that I've either met or I know, and, looking to see, like, do I have pictures of their work that I have personally seen and taken pictures of? And yeah, I actually had work from a majority of these people that, I wrote down. A couple that I missed showing, Faith Ringgold. I've seen one of her quilts. Now I'm going to blank. I think it was at the Smithsonian. Sabisa Butler, Carolyn Maslumi, Betty Ford Smith. We just looked at a bunch of their stuff. Elizabeth Talford Scott, of course. Joyce Scott is Elizabeth Talford Scott's daughter. She works more sculpturally, but she also does a lot of like fiber manipulation. I would not call her a quilter, but she does work in fiber. Rosie Lee Tompkins, we talked about a very long time ago. I've never seen any of her quilts in person, though. Dr. Myra Brown Green, we just looked at. Latifa Safir was somebody that I'm hoping I could get to meet her at QuiltCon this year. Her work, she's a contemporary modern quilter. Look her up. I love her work. It's really cool. It's very, some of her pieces are very like, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like very spare. Like there's these ones that are just kind of like they're orbs. But she's made them. I don't know how she's made them because I haven't seen them in person. But yeah, look her up because maybe we'll look at her stuff again this month. But her stuff is really amazing. Sean Kimber, Michael Cummings is somebody I have never seen his work in person. And for those of you that used to watch Mary Fawn's Quilt Nerd, she went and talked to Michael Cummings at Festival of Quilts in Birmingham. I want to say it was 20. It was either 20. I think it was 2022. Oh my gosh, that seems so long ago now. But yes, his quilts are really lovely. They're they're very unique. They're story quilts, but not the same kind of story quilts that say Yvonne Wells is making. They kind of have a different vibe to them. The G's Ben quilts. I feel like I've seen some for sure. I have not seen enough. I love their quilts. And then the two that I could not find my pictures. I've tucked them away somewhere. But they are the Ellen Morton Littlejohn and Margaret Morton Bibb quilts. I believe it's two quilts, and Littlejohn and Bibb were sisters. They were enslaved sisters, and they were incredible, like show-stopping quilters. The two quilts that were attributed to them, at least one of them is in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Both of them might be there though, that I'm thinking, but they're stunning. I saw one of them at the American Folk Art Museum, like 2022, I think 2023. But yeah, they were, and then of course, Harriet Powers. I'm trying to think who else I missed. There are certainly many, many, many other prominent African American quilters, but just in terms of quilts that I have spent time with or wanted to see, that was kind of my laundry list this morning that I made. So we'll look at more as the month progresses. Of course, I will be at QuiltCon mid-month, so hopefully I'll be meeting some people, seeing some old friends, and of course, I mean, you guys know I could spend an entire month on QuiltCon photos. So, all right. Are you guys ready to look at some funny quilts? This is really fun. This was just like, again, providence. I did not expect to find what I found. So this article that I'm going to read you, it's by Barbara Brackman, but it was in the January 1983 issue of Quilter's Newsletter magazine. And since I have the front cover up, let's see, what is this quilt? So on the cover, it says Mayflower quilt, 70 by 80.5 inches, was pieced in Kansas about 1880 from plain and print work shirts in white and various shades of blue. Work shirts. Following the quilt making tradition, the quilt is made of scraps. The pieced block is similar to other traditional patterns called pine cones, Nancy Cabot, and Philadelphia patch, Ladies Art Company catalog. Mrs. Danner's fifth quilt book tells of finding a similar quilt in 1967 in Fredonia, Kansas, which was already 100 years old, and which was identified as a pattern that came over on the Mayflower in 1620. The quilt is from the collection of Bonnie Lehman, so the owner and editor of Quilter's Newsletter magazine. So it was her quilt. What a lovely quilt, though. I don't know that this is going to be very clear, but I mean, you can see it's got, it's probably elbow quilting or Baptist fan, you might know it as. But you can see, yeah, these are definitely very worn colors. They look like they're made out of something like old and worn. But what a lovely, lovely quilt. And And also, I guess some of these, I'm not sure. These, I guess, I really can't tell. Do they have the, it's hard to tell whether they must. All of these must have the sawtooth on the edges of the triangles, but it just looks very muddy. So I don't know if it's just blended in, whatever the fabric in there. Very close in color. Yeah, I guess this is like a stripe in there. Yeah, this one's very blurry, whatever's in there. Okay, so let us, all right. So like I said, this is called Quilts with a Sense of Humor. And we'll zoom into each of these. Oh yeah, Druid, yeah. The softness of the color makes it look like it's knit or wool. I agree. Yeah, and knowing that it's made out of like old work shirts, you can imagine. I mean, like when cotton and linen, and I don't know that they would have been linen work shirts. They're again cotton, but um, those fibers, like, they break down. And I mean, we've all had like our favorite pair of jeans or our favorite shirt, or just something that you washed over and over and over again. Yeah, so I bet it was a snuggly quilt. All right, so Quilts with a Sense of Humor. Again, this is January 1983, Quilters Newsletter Magazine. Barbara Brackman. Quilt making has more traditions clinging to it than a quilt maker's navy blue suit has stray threads. As quilt making develops as an artistic medium, we are seeing quilters take a new look at some of these traditions. They are discovering that not only is the quilt to keep us warm and please us visually, it can carry a message while making us smile. It can give us a new view of an old situation. Quilts can poke fun at quilt making itself. Some quilters have been taking irreverent pokes at old conventions, creating unorthodox quilts full of inside jokes. Others are using quilts as a medium through which to satirize a variety of issues in our culture. For example, is The Goose is Loose, which is this one right here. So The Goose is Loose by Beth Gutchin. So Beth Gutchin pokes gentle fun at one traditional design by freeing the triangular birds, which have submissively flown nose to tail around countless quilts. So, of course, Wild Goose Chase, right? Jean Ray Laurie. Now, this is one that was really interesting to me. I thought I knew the majority of Jean Ray Laurie's work. I did not know about this one. This one right here is called Leaky Kaleidoscope. And what's really interesting about this, there is a modern quilter, and I saw her work actually in a lecture by a professor, but they're black and white blocks, but they remind me kind of this. But the quilt is specifically about climate change. So you have these traditional looking blocks, but they're melting and puddling, like ice or a liquid. A frozen liquid is that's melting and puddling, and that totally reminds me of this. So Leaky Kaleidoscope. Jean Ray Laurie's Leaky Kaleidoscope gives us a new way of looking at the hard edge geometrics of the pieced quilt. Certainly, one of the favorite 20th century design customs is the sentimental baby quilt featuring a fuzzy, cuddly animal. My tarantula is fuzzy, if not cuddly. And I saw this, and it took me a minute when I realized Barbara Brackman made this. When I think of Barbara Brackman, I often think of, quilts that are, like reproductions, right? She does a lot of, here, let me move me so you can see the whole thing. She makes these these like traditional blocks, and these are traditional blocks, and these are most likely, she's using these cheddar, and it's chromium orange and chromium yellow, or there might be, I think there's another word for them, but in any event, they're, you guys know, they're cheddar. And then these kind of browns and blacks that are, again, clearly reproductions, or she might, for all I know, she might have actually been using the real deal, but nonetheless, we know what Barbara Brackman's about, right? But the fact that she has made a tarantula. And by the way, I have spent a good amount of time with Barbara Brackman, and she is an absolute hoot. She is so funny. She's very irreverent. This quilt very much describes her, I think. I'm going to skip ahead to the next page, but we'll come back and look at these again. Uh-oh. What is happening here with my... Oh, there we go. So this is the quilt she's going to talk about next, right here. You guys might know it. I've probably shown it. I know Mary did, if you ever watched Quilt Nerd. So Sunbonnet Sue's sweet and sentimental view of childhood goes back to the 19th century. 12 members of a sewing group, the Seamsters Local number 500 of Lawrence, Kansas, gave into their suppressed desires to eliminate the goody two-shoes in their pasts by creating the sunsets on Sunbonnet Sue. So this is a pretty famous quilt. And I think it's at the International Quilt Museum now, I think. But Barbara has been up to her old hijinks, and she has been making more of these. And it's very funny. I interviewed her because I was, you guys know, I very much into Sunbonnet Sue. And I did a Sunbonnet Sue lecture a while back. And so I interviewed her about this quilt. And, she humored me. But she said, oh my gosh, if I never see Sunbonnet Sue again, it would be, not too soon. But it's funny because now she's very politically outspoken. If you don't follow her on social media, you might want to go check it out on Facebook and just see what she's up to. But she has a Facebook page called Super Sue, and I'm a member of that. And she posts a lot of these crazy, Sunbonnet Sue doing things, and it's usually of a political nature. I submitted one block to an upcoming quilt that she's putting together. So it's a bunch of us did, and it's in this vein. I'll have to say it is about the administration. So, but yeah, it was just funny to me. I was like, oh, Barbara, you can't get away from Sunbonnet Sue, no matter how hard you try. No look at contemporary American life would be complete without a reference to the national fitness obsession. Karen Wright Gould depicts the nightmares of every dieter who has sworn off sweets and promised to rise and run. I think that's here. No, it's on the other page, sorry. This one. And this one took me a minute. I didn't read the article, so we are reading this article together for the first time, but I did look at the quilts, and it took me a minute. I was like, what is going on with this? And I realized, this kind of looks like a batik fabric. So I don't know if she, if the artist created this herself, but you can see it's a guy running, a woman running, because she's doing like, track and field stuff, leaping over hurdles. And then you've got slices of pie, hot fudge sundaes, slices of cake, and a scale in the middle. And the caption does say this ruler that's in the middle is not part of the quilt. I guess it's the only picture they had, and it happened to have a ruler in there to show the scale. But I thought this was pretty cool. Robert, your granddaughter would love the tarantula. Is she into bugs or is she into spiders? I have to say, not a fan of anything with 8 legs. Unless it comes from the sea. I can't remember. Do crabs have 8 legs? I don't remember. My automat is a quilt which started to be a replica of a Kansas City star pattern from the 1930s entitled Coffee Cups. So let's look at that one. That's this. The design quickly reflected my attitude towards an all-coffee diet. What is a cup of coffee without a piece of cherry pie a la mode or a slice of pumpkin pie with whipped cream? So that's what this is. And I love the fact that she's used what look like some novelty fabrics. These look like they're strawberries, and this looks like big strawberries. I can't tell what this is. It might just be like a little ditzy print. But then I think the coffee cup ones are the vintage pattern or the antique pattern, and then these she created herself. Political events have always provided material for satirists, from the newspaper cartoonists to stand-up comedians to quilters. Fannie Shaw's Prosperity is Just Around the Corner is a quilt from the 1930s, which took a mildly satirical look at Herbert Hoover's Depression promises. Now that's interesting. Do you guys know which quilt I'm talking about? Bear with me 1 minute and I will look it up because I don't agree with Barbara. Sorry, Ms. Brackman. I don't agree. You guys know this quilt. I'm certain I've showed it. If you followed Mary, you've definitely seen this quilt. Even if I could type. Okay. So to me, this quilt, this is somebody's blog, but so this is the quilt she's talking about. And again, you guys who watched Mary Fons, definitely, we spent a lot of time on this quilt, and I love this quilt. But what Barbara's saying here is that it's a mildly satirical look at Herbert Hoover's Depression promises. I've always looked at this quilt as, this is hope. This is like a I don't know. And I realize this is a pretty blurry picture of it. Let's see if we can find a better one. I can't remember where it is. Dallas Museum. So maybe it's at the Briscoe. I'm not sure. Well, none of these are particularly great pictures, but let's see. Well, this is even worse. It doesn't show the whole quilt. Yeah, it looks like this one on Pam Holland's website might be the best we've got. In any event, so down here in this far corner, this is Uncle Sam coming around the corner. All of the people across the quilt are different professions. So, you've got like a housewife, and you've got a baker, and a baseball player, and just all of these different people, a cowboy. And you also have the elephant and the donkey. And then here in the very bottom corner, you have Uncle Sam coming back. So they're all looking this way. Uncle Sam's coming around the corner the other way. And with him, he has got, I think it's something here that's about repealing prohibition. I think it's like a beer. And then there's something about the economy. So that's what this is. And, I guess I'm not sure exactly what is satirical about it. And here in the middle is the farmer, because, the plight of the farmer was really important, at this point in time. So anyway, I don't know. Sorry, Barbara, I don't agree, but it's a fun quilt. It's very cartoon-like. Maybe that's what she means. Okay, so less gentle satire is the basis for Nixon's resignation quilt, designed by Ed Larson and stitched by Fran Soika. And I think that is on the next page. So that's this. It says crocodile tears stream from the eyes of earlier presidents. Oh, Robin remembers. Yeah. While Richard Nixon breaks the ribbon of American history. I'm trying to see what. So you've got the eagle here, and then you've got the ribbon. You know, the ribbon that the eagle always has in its mouth, and then you've got all these presidents. Not sure who this lady is. Got Uncle Sam. Obviously, we've got Lincoln, George Washington over here. Larson also takes a cutting view of another contemporary problem in the energy quilt, which was sewn by Carol Crucian. While Uncle Sam is out of gas, some large oil companies are seeing, hearing, and speaking no evil as empty slogans fill the air. So that is on this previous page. Sorry, I'm going to jump back and forth, you guys. So that's this. And this is Standard Oil. This just says gas. And this one is dark. I can't tell what it says, but you can see they're like, you know, the gas pumps have, you know, arms and are doing things. And then this is Uncle Sam, like standing over them. And it's saying, trust us. You expect more from a leader. Let's see, what does this say? The performance company. So Ed Larson, he is somebody that I really want to get into, you know, looking at his quilts, because I actually saw one. My friend and colleague Julie Silber had one of his quilts at AQSG seminar this past fall. Somebody bought it, I think, right away. So I only got to see it for a couple minutes, but yeah, Ed Larson is just, his work is very interesting. It's very, you know, cartoon like this, but he's saying things. They're definitely political statements. We laugh at all our serious concerns, from health to politics, and we also laugh at life's irritations. The noise we live with every day has inspired another of Karen White Gould's batiqued and quilted wall hangings. Okay, so they are batik. So that's this one. In The Great Escape, she imagines a late morning sleep, safe from interruptions from some common noisemakers. And you can see there's the telephone, cars. I think this is a typewriter. Yeah, very cool. I like. I wasn't familiar with Karen Gould's work before this, so I like those too. Those are pretty neat. In the hands of the artist with a sense of humor, a sense of design, and skills with a needle and thread, quilts are not only a delight for the eye, they can amuse, and they can make a point. As quilt making develops as art, we will undoubtedly see more artists using fabric as a medium for satire. Perhaps one aspect of quilt making which makes it so pleasurable is the restriction of the many traditions. They give us a structure within which we may be creative, and it is comforting to have boundaries and to know what they are. It is also refreshing to take a new view of those traditions and to remind ourselves that we shouldn't take anything, and certainly not quilt making, too seriously. I love that. You know, somebody said to me before, there are no quilt emergencies, right? That was Margot Strand Jensen's point of view when she found some authentic antique feed sacks. That's this. The kind that quilts have been made out of and lined with for generations, and created a quilted wall hanging out of them entitled Utter Nonsense. And that is this. It has udders. I was like, I saw this and I was like, what is going on with that quilt? And then I looked at it, I'm like, all right, there's a cow. It's a feed bag. I bet you anything it's udders. And then I saw the title, Utter Nonsense. So yeah. So that's good stuff. So let's go back and just flip through them individually now so that because I was bouncing back and forth so much. Okay, so Leaky Kaleidoscope is by Jean Ray Laurie. It doesn't give a date for that. So Jean Ray Laurie, it would probably be late 60s to late 80s would be my guess with this one. I would say this was probably made in the 70s. Well, it couldn't have been the late 80s because it's 1983. Okay, so this was made from the 60s to 1983, but I'm going to say this is probably like the late 70s. So then we have this one, which is Karen Gould Wright. What does it say? Yeah, no date on that one. The Goose is Loose. This one. That one is 1979. And it's really charming. You look at this and you're like, oh yeah. Wild goose chase, and then the geese are just, I'm just looking to see. I think the borders are a little different the way she's constructed it. Okay, and then of course we've got Barbara's Tarantula. Seriously, this is really knowing Barbara's personality. It doesn't surprise me, but seeing this quilt surprises me because, again, like she does different stuff than this. So, but it says The Fuzzy and Cuddly Tarantula, 1978 by Barbara Brackman. And then let's go back. So Sunsets on Sunbonnet Sue. Let me call out a couple because it does give the name of some of the makers. And I found something that gave the makers of every single block. I think Barbara's got 2 blocks in here. But she doesn't identify which ones are hers. She identifies others. So The Sunsets on Sunbonnet Sue is copyright 1982. So this was made just a year before she wrote this article. So she says the Seamsters Union Local 500 showing 20 ways to do in this perennial favorite, including first row number 4, that's this, The Timely Skylab Accident by Carol Gillum. Second row number 2, Strangled by the Sunflower by Patty Boyer. Third row number 2, this one is great. This is the Eaten by the Snake by Nadja Dangerfield. The fourth row is the melodramatic Tied to the Tracks by Georgianne Aglinsky. And row number 5, this one right here, is called Jaws 3. That's a shark right there coming up to get her. And that one's by Nancy Metzinger. Definitely the snake is my favorite. Hands down, always. Every time I see this quilt, I'm like, Nadja Dangerfield's quilt or block was so great, so fabulous. If I remember correctly, and I have my notes are not with me, but when I talked to Barbara, it was her, I think it was her and Nadja Dangerfield that kind of had the conversation about this. And Nadja had drawn like a little cartoon of Sunbonnet Sue, I think with arrows in her back. I think this block right here. And it's hard to see because it's light, it's very light colored fabrics. But so she had drawn a little picture like that, and Barbara was like, yes. So it was Barbara and Nadja, I think that's how you pronounce her name, that I think rallied all of their fellow guild members to make this quilt. And if I remember correctly, I don't think this was terribly popular with everybody. Their president, right? Yeah, their president, and it's Betty. I think it's Betty Hagstrom, I think is her name. I've got that right. She was a Sunbonnet Sioux aficionado, and she loved Sunbonnet Sioux. She made a lot of Sunbonnet Sioux quilts, and the rest of the guild was kind of annoyed. So that's kind of where this came from. But needless to say, she was not amused by this quilt, as you can imagine. All right. So this is the automat quilt. That one's 1981. And then the energy quilt right next to it is Ed Larson and Carol Crucian. It doesn't say, there's no date on that one. And then so Karen White Gold. Karen White Gold. This one, The Great Escape. She doesn't give a date on that one. Nixon's Resignation Quilt. Probably early 70s. I mean, I would assume that Ed Larson and Franz Waco worked on that and made it within the year or two after Nixon resigned, I would guess. And then finally, Utter Nonsense. The Feedsack is 1975, and that again is Margot Strand Jensen. So those are the funny quilts. So I hope you enjoyed that. You know, I mean, what we found funny in the 80s versus what we find funny today. All right. Let me move my things around here a little bit. We are reading American Quilts. Now, I did discover, I'm pretty sure, this is downloadable, I think, from yeah, this is downloadable, I think, from the Internet Archive. I will try to find the link for Thursday. I scanned across it while I was actually looking for information about Elizabeth Wells Robertson. But I haven't been able to find out a whole lot of information about her, just a couple of things. And we can look at this again. Let me just find, I want to show you. She's got a quilt that is at the Art Institute of Chicago. And here it is. It's hard to see, obviously, because it's light, very light colored fabrics, but it's a crib quilt, so it's small, and it's depicting something. It looks like there's probably like a poem or a few lines of something here, and then it looks like there's these sort of like clouds, gust of wind, kind of around that, and then this is a body of water, I guess. And it looks like there's a woman and I think a child sitting on the bank here. And you have this little island, and then these mountains. So I'm not really sure what it's about, just because I just can't see it very well. But it's very peaceful looking. It seems very serene. This was part of an exhibit. Oh, she has it here. She does have it here. I'm sorry. Okay, so rewind. Okay, so she made this quilt in 1950, circa 1950. Not long before she passed away. So yeah, she's an older woman when she's made this quilt and as well as the book. The book was written in 48. So it says, in the foreground of the pictorial quilt, a young girl sits on a grassy hillside reading a book. Okay, it's a book. It's not another child. I thought it was a mother and child. The cover bears the initials RLS, which refer to the poet Robert Louis Stevenson, who wrote the stanza embroidered in the sky above the landscape. The stanza is from the poem Travel, which appeared in Stevenson's 1885 collection, A Child's Garden of Verses. And the embroidered stanza reads, I should like to rise and go where the golden apples grow, where in sunshine reaching out, eastern cities miles about, are with mosque and minaret among sandy gardens set. Oh, that's the end of it. Okay. Stevenson's poem invites the young reader to imagine places, as does the quilt with its depiction of a city in the distance. Da, da, da. Here we go. There's the exhibition history. So the exhibition it was in was the one that I looked up was Making Memories, Quilts as Souvenirs. And there was a lot of kind of, it was interesting that they used the term souvenir. And just looking at, like, quickly looking at the quilts, a lot of them looked almost like, not really necessarily story quilts, but kind of like pictorial, like there's something to be gleaned. There's some kind of story to be gleaned. They're very image heavy. So yeah, I'd like to look at that in more detail when I get a chance. But in the meantime, it's a lovely little quilt. So a few other things that we know about her. Oh, and I have a picture of her too. I found a picture. Okay, let me show you that real quick and then I'll. Unfortunately, it's on eBay. um, but there is, there's a number of these sellers that do like press photos. They sell press photos. And you could find some really cool stuff, some interesting things. So supposedly, this is Elizabeth Wells Robertson. She's on the left. So this is her. With Mildred Fahey. And they were Chicago school teachers. So, yeah, beyond that, I don't know a whole lot about her. There really just is not much. So she's born in the late what did we say? 1884. So like the mid 1880s. She lives into her 80s, right? I can't do the math in my head. But she's working in quilts later in life. So, and this is in the 30s. So at this point, she's probably about my age. She's a woman of a certain age. I thought that was cool. It just happened to pop up when I was looking, and I was like, I bet that's not really her. I bet that's some other, Elizabeth Robertson. But when I found some more info about her, it definitely is her. Okay, so let's see. What did they say about her? So, oh, I think it's on my phone. Bear with me. So what it says about her, so she was born in Chicago in 1884 and went on to graduate from the University of Chicago in 1906. She had a career in education. She had a long career in the Chicago public school system, and she taught at the Carl Schurz High School and eventually rose to become the director of art for the Chicago public schools. Beyond her writing, she was a practitioner of the craft, and one of her original art quilts is held in the permanent textiles collection at the Art Institute of Chicago, which we just looked at. And she passed away in 1956 in Elgin, Illinois. Her work is often cited alongside other classic quilt historians like Ruth Finley and Carrie Hall, as she was part of an early 20th century movement that sought to document American quilting as a serious form of social history. So the details about the child's crib quilt, not terribly interesting. Just kind of describes it. But what else did it say here? So she was not only a historian, but also a recognized textile artist in her own right. She was awarded the Mrs. Julius Rosenwald First Prize in Textiles at the Art Institute of Chicago. Her original quilts, often inspired by her travels to the sea, desert, and the flowers of California, were exhibited widely at institutions, including the Carnegie Institute in Pittsburgh and various fine arts museums in California and the United Kingdom. So that was just what I found out about her so far. I will look more. I will find out more. But let's see. Let us jump into the book. I feel like a fish out of water because I'm trying to work off of multiple screens that are not set up the way they usually are. Okay, that and that. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I think I showed you this image the other day. This is right inside the front of the book. I don't know that I would necessarily call it the frontispiece, but it's kind of where it is in the book. And then I held some things up, but didn't really show them very well. So this is one thing. I think I mentioned that there's these kind of reddish, sort of pale, sort of translucent reddish illustrations throughout. And it's really interesting how they did this. And I kind of wonder, I mean, she was a high school teacher, but, with experience in the school system, I'm wondering if she, had some thoughts about publishing, or this particular publisher had some thoughts about this, and this is why they did this. But I just really loved it. Like, this is so charming. This little illustration, and these are from places. So what this says is, oh no, this is just about the Index of American Design in Washington. So it's not about this. In any event, these seem to me, I mean, looking at this is obviously a line drawing created from either some actual quilting or more likely an album quilt, I'm thinking. I suspect this was created from some quilting. Can you imagine if these were just lines? Forget about the filled in. If these were just lines, I could see this as like a quilting design, or a little study in a block, some type of album or story quilt. Anyway, I just thought it was cute. I did mention the quilting party. You can't get away from the quilting party. And what's really funny is that we don't know who painted this. It was found in Massachusetts. It's dated to 1840 to 1850. Oil on wood, and that's it. That's all we know. But it depicts something very important, that we only have what I guess would be anecdotal evidence of. Granted, women wrote in their diaries perhaps about going to quilting bees, or doing group quilting. But this is an actual depiction of what's happening, supposedly. And in this space, whatever this space is, this is somebody's I guess, quote unquote, great room. You would assume this might be like the front door. There's the rifle and the deer antlers above the door. This is looks like a powder horn and bag. I would assume that this is a stove over here because of, it looks like a stovepipe. And then you have the quilt frame. And what I thought was interesting is they depict men here sitting around the quilt frame with the women. These are two guys. This is a guy. That was interesting to me, and I'm kind of wondering, were the women irritated by that, or are they like, come talk to me? I don't know. This also, this looks like an older man here with this baby and possibly the baby's mother. And then just these other people standing back here, probably by the stove, right? So this shows up in lots of quilt history books, and also quilter Bertha Stange did a version of this in applique on one of her quilts. And a colleague of mine, Cheryl, remade Bertha Stenge's quilt, or inspired by Bertha Stenge's quilt for our recent quilt study. So I've seen like multiple iterations of this now made in fabric. So it's kind of cool, you know. And I often wonder like if the person who painted this could only see, you know, what you know where their painting has gone and what it has inspired. You would hope they'd be happy. You'd hope they'd be proud. Okay. And then these are the buildings that are at the front of the book. And I know I held them up, but I wanted to show you again, just in case she references this stuff. So this first one, this is a street in Slaterville, Rhode Island, named for Samuel and John Slater. And the Slaters were mill people. And this is their mill. So I presume, you know, she's gonna talk about these things, maybe. And then we have the Sortwell House. And this says, Sortwell House, Wicasset, Maine, one of the fine houses built by sea captains in the days when Wicasset, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I think that's how it's pronounced. Wicasset was a flourishing seaport, and materials were brought from England and the continent of Europe to decorate the colonial homes of America. So yeah, you know, the New England states, I'm learning a lot more about the importation of, you know, fabrics and things, and kind of what people assume, like, did, you know, colonists bring over, and then, you know, after the Revolutionary War, there's all kinds of, you know, economic strife between the US and the UK. But then things progress and then seem okay. So, you know, then we've got, you know, just different conditions with materials coming in. So, you know, some of these sea captains and whatnot became wealthy men. So this house is, I feel, a little boring. So I'm going to go back to this. I love this picture, and we'll look at this while I start reading. And we'll be getting to another picture soon. I did take the time to do all the pictures. There's a lot to look at in this book. I think I didn't count the pages, but I think there are more pages with pictures than there are pages of text in this book. And she's done a really fantastic job with like captioning a lot of the pictures. So I think they're going to be, when we get to them, they're going to be very interesting. Okay, so where we were, we'd really just gotten started. And we had read the introduction, part 1, beginnings, and we're still kind of in there. We've moved on, and we're going to look at early American quilts. So to remind you, we are reading American Quilts. Let me give you the subtitle. It's got a subtitle too, I think. Oh, maybe it doesn't. I thought it had a subtitle. I've left the jacket at home, the dust jacket, because it was not in great shape. But anyway, American Quilts by Elizabeth Wells Robertson, published in 1948. So this is contemporary to Florence Peto and Dr. Dunton's books. And we are in the first chapter still. So, the earliest American quilts. While the men were cutting trees, squaring the timbers, subduing the wilderness by clearing, plowing, and planting, the women and children were by no means idle. Between cooking the coarse food, nursing the sick, administering to the dying, they found time to daub mud on the walls of their dwellings, making the boards weatherproof. Also, when the first crops came in and the first raw materials became available for home manufacture, they spun the hemp and wool and wove them into cloth. Their contribution to the cultural well-being has been much overlooked and is a question as to whether the foremother was ever given enough credit for her difficult task in making the first settlements the success that they were. I gotta say, I wish this lady was still alive because I feel like she was ahead of her time. She's really got, like, I think a very a very forward-looking attitude about, you know, women's history. This is in 1848, and she's clearly identifying the problem with history is that the women were left out of it for the most part. I'm trying to remember. I think it was literally like in the first page where she talks about. Um, yeah, she's talking about the importance of quilts and how they are documents. Like, like I feel like I've been channeling this woman my entire like quilt loving career. It required men and women of great strength, courage, and industry to survive the terrific work and the hard winter weather. They proved the hard winter weather. Can you imagine, you guys? I mean, the weather that many of us have been experiencing, um, California and Robin accepted, because you guys have been having warm weather. Um, I just think about how cold it's been recently and how I'm just such a weenie. I run from the house to the car, and I have a newer car, and it's got heated seats. And I'm like, turn the heated seats on. I can't imagine some, colonist pioneer slash, whatever woman who has to do all the things she does basically in a shack or a hole dug in the ground. And meanwhile, I'm complaining about how cold I am. So what these people endured is a testament. So the hard winter weather. They proved that the factor necessary to a strong and enduring society was not gold nor gain, but hard work and a sense of responsibility. First to the family, then to the community. Right, Robin? And like remote starting. I've never had that before. I have it now. I'm very excited. Because to be able to walk outside and just get in a warm car, it's life-changing. Soon the women found that they did not have nearly enough clothes and bedding, nor sufficient quantities of materials with which to make quilts. Therefore, as clothing wore out, they cut away the worn parts and saved every tiny piece that would be useful in making coverings for their beds. From the foregoing, we can readily see how the first quilt, the crazy quilt, came into being. I don't know where she's going with this. Quiltish. All right, Canadian. Yes, those of us that live in southern states, dry states, we are weenies. We like a warm seat to shoot me. Okay. So, yeah, I'm not sure where she's going with this. Readily see how the first quilt, the crazy quilt, came into being. It was indeed crazy as far as design was concerned. There was no plan to design in shape, arrangement, or color, arrangement of color, or use of material. As the parents' clothes wore out, if there was a large enough area left without holes to make a child's dress or a pair of trousers for the little boy, these smaller garments were made first. Then every odd-shaped piece left over after that was scrupulously saved and kept together until there was enough to make a quilt. It is interesting to note that there were two ways of making a crazy quilt. In the first, each tiny piece was fitted together like a picture puzzle, and pieces were just as irregular in shape. Sometimes, if the piece was too large, it was cut into smaller ones to maintain a sort of average in the general area of the piece. This was the beginning of organization or design. So, you guys, the reason why I'm having trouble reading this, let me just... I talked about how cute this was. In fact, I just said how cute these kind of... And I know I showed you guys this the other day. It's really hard to read through it. Like the design itself is really cute and charming and very easy to see. The words under it are not. So I'm struggling here. Luckily, this is not on every page. So, oh yeah, totally agree, Robin. The heated seat is good because it is difficult to drive in a heavy coat because you start sweating. But the heated seat just keeps the back of you warm, as it should. Okay. Let's see. So if the piece was too large, it was cut into smaller ones to maintain a sort of average in the general area of the piece. This was the beginning of organization or design. Plaid woolens were sewed next to a triangle cut from red woolen underwear. As material was woven, pieces of linsey, woolsey, and shoddy got mixed up with all of the precious all wool materials. Linen was used, and later, when chintzes and calicos were imported from beyond the Horn, these too eventually found their way into quilt. So, I don't know. You know, this idea of the crazy quilt. I don't know that I agree with her because we really don't find evidence of crazy quilts like right after the Revolutionary War. I don't know about some of her history here is a little questionable, or where she's kind of trying to put this together. True, it was some books like that. It was too cool until you read through it. Yeah, yes. I do like some of her writing thus far, but I'm not understanding what she's talking about here because this is not exactly true to history. The second type of crazy quilt was made at a later date, yes, 1880s, and in it were put scraps of silk, velvet, brocade, plush, satin, wool, cotton, and linen. Bits of a wedding dress were sewed next to a piece of scarlet uniform. These quilts, for the most part, were made in blocks, she's got in quotes, the square units of design which make a quilt. The designer determined the size of her quilt and then decided just how many blocks she wished to sew together and put into her top. The early quilts were large. Yes, they were. An average old quilt was about the size of a modern sheet, 90 by 108 inches. Sometimes the blocks were large, sometimes they were small, but all had to be contained in the given area an equal number of times. When the maker of the crazy quilt of the second variety made up her mind as to the size of her block, she proceeded to baste her irregular pieces upon it. These background blocks were made of coarsely woven sacks. Sometimes. She's kind of making some emphatic points here, and just from my tiny little bit of baby quilt research, she's a little too emphatic because sure, many background blocks were made of things like sacks, sugar and flour sacks, etc., but not all of them were. I mean, I have several crazy quilts that definitely did not use sacks. They used recycled and upcycled, like just household linens and clothing and stuff. The edges of the pieces in these quilts were turned in, and the seams were treated in a decorative manner, an important step from the original unorganized quilt. A charming aspect is that the tiny bits were sewed down to the blocks with beautiful even stitches. Sometimes. Threads of various lengths and colors were used to make chain stitch, head stitch, buttonhole stitch, herringbone, and all the various kinds of faggoting used in outlining. Don't come for me. Faggoting is a term is a decorative stitch that's used to bring two pieces of fabric together. So that's used in outlining. In some pieces, designs themselves were outlined. For instance, if a triangular shaped piece suggested a fan, the ribs of a fan were outlined. Sometimes flowers and birds were embroidered on the irregular pieces, also farm and domestic animals. When the blocks were all made, they were stitched together and the top was placed over the back with a light filling in between. Not true. Very rarely would the later crazy quilts that she's talking about have been batted. They are almost always either just have a raw back and maybe the edges are somehow finished off either with like a ribbon or a binding of some sort, or just turned to the back and stitched, or they just have like a backing, and it might be tied to the backing. So yeah, not all of this information is accurate. I'm sorry to tell you, Elizabeth. In the beginning, then, quilts were strictly utilitarian articles born of the immediate necessity of providing warm covers for beds. Also, not true. I so much loved the first few pages, but yeah. In the beginning, yes, there were most likely people that had to cobble some quilts together, but for the most part, they had other things they used instead, like bed rugs and woven coverlets and things like that. Many of the people that came over and had any sort of wealth made the quilts we look at often, like the chintz quilts and things like that. And this idea of this crazy quilt, we're using bits of cotton. There is something in here that she shows in the pictures that I'll have to call back to later. And I think she calls it a hit or miss quilt. And it's not a crazy quilt. It's more like just kind of pieces, like square pieces that are kind of, they don't, you know, they're hit or miss. And I actually have a quilt. It's certainly not as old as what she's talking about, but now I can't find it. We'll get to it eventually. But yeah, historically speaking, there's just not a lot of these quote unquote utilitarian quilts that she's talking about until later on, right? Like, yeah, throughout the 19th century, certainly there were utilitarian quilts, but not messy utilitarian quilts. Like they pieced fabrics together to get enough fabric to make blocks. They weren't making crazy quilts that early. In the beginning, then, let's see, quilts were strictly utilitarian. They were not laid away in chests, but were put into active use the moment they were finished. There are therefore few of the early quilts extant from which to make a record. Well, that's the thing. Are they not extant because they were used up? Are they not extant because they didn't actually exist in great numbers? I think it's the second. But we know that within the four walls of a simple, crude cabin, there could have been little thought of adornment or design. Here, the mere job of physical survival was too great. We have ample evidence, however, that the inherent love of the beautiful impelled the quilt maker to produce, as soon as she could, pieces that were decorative as well as utilitarian. These are the quilts we know. These are the quilts that we know. And it can be said that the woman of early New England expressed herself aesthetically in her pieced quilts. More intricate design came into the quilts when new materials could be purchased or whenever there was enough of the old to carry through a whole quilt unit. These later developments are discussed in the chapter on pieced quilts and applique quilts. But before we look further into the construction and design of the different types of quilts and the fascinating names given to them, let us first take a look at the materials from which they're made and also see how this was manufactured. So let's see. I think we can get into the very beginning of this chapter. One thing I do like she does, she kind of has these chapters, like it's obvious she was a teacher. She has these chapters like cut into units. I think is pretty good. So part 2, the manufacture of textiles used in American quilts. This is still bugging me how she's talking about these utilitarian quilts. Like this is not true. They were using other types of blankets. They were using woven things. Okay. The manufacture of textiles used in American quilts. In examining old quilts, great admiration is immediately aroused in us for the materials used because of the wide variety of weaves and textures. In some of the early quilts, cotton and linen were used with silk and satin. We recognize that in these fabrics, such matters as spinning, weaving, dyeing, and printing had become highly developed arts of long standing. The materials in the first quilts, of course, were all imported. The bits of fabric used had been brought over by the early settlers in the form of garments, curtains, and bedspreads, chiefly from England. Yes, we know this. We know very little about the beginnings of spinning and weaving, except now we do. There's lots of scholars that have looked into spinning and weaving. Although we have always been taught that when Adam delved, Eve span. Is span the biblical past tense of spun or spin? Oh goodness, she's got a footnote for that, but or it's an end note. It is not our task here to endeavor to trace the ancient history of the craft, but rather to study the materials that were being made in France and in England at the time the pioneers were building their America and out of which they made their early quilts. Cotton, which is the most important commodity in this research, is a plant of the hollyhock family. I didn't know that. I didn't know it was part of the hollyhock family. Is that accurate? I mean, I have no reason to doubt her about that, but that's interesting. It's got a fluffy seed pod called the boll. The best cotton we know today has a long fiber and is known as Sea Island cotton because it is grown on the islands off the coast of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. I want to get my hands on some of that Sea Isle cotton. It is generally considered it is generally considered that next to Sea Isle cotton, Egyptian cotton has the greatest value. Marco Polo gave an early account of cotton as a vegetable wool growing on trees. I think I remember when we read the Heritage of Cotton. Or not the Heritage of Cotton. Is it the Heritage of Cotton? I get them mixed up. There's the modern book and then there's the old one. Let me see. When we were reading the book about cotton, yes, The Heritage of Cotton was the 1924 book that we read. I remember that he talked about people, like early people, not understanding what they were looking at, thought that they were like little sheep, little lambs. Oh, so Druid has some details. So cotton belongs to the same plant family as hollyhocks, which is the Malvaceae or mallow family. Okay. This family, known for having flowers that attract pollinators, also includes okra, hibiscus, and cacao. Who knew? Cotton, genus Gossypium, and hollyhocks, genus Alcea, share similar hibiscus-like flower structures. That is fascinating. Who knew? I'm going to have to add that information to my little cotton study. Fascinating. Oh, yes. Okay. So it is Marco Polo. So he gave the early account of cotton as a vegetable, wool growing on trees. He pictured them with sheep heads on the ends of the branches. Their little heads, the little sheep heads. In England, the first reference to cotton was made in 1578 when most of it was imported from Turkey, Smyrna, and Cyprus, and was called cotton wool. From Calcutta, as early as 1631, the East India Company imported cotton woven into cloth called calico. This cotton cloth was soft and was referred to as linen. Clear as mud, right? So, imported cotton woven into cloth called calico. This cotton cloth was soft and referred to as linen. I think we're talking about in the like household linens. I think that's what she means. Indeed, there was at one time a great argument as to whether it was cotton or linen, and of this contention, Samuel Pepys wrote in his diary on February 27th, 1663, Sir Martin Noel told us of a dispute between him as a farmer of the additional duty and the East India Company, whether calico be linen or no, which he says it is, having been ever esteemed so. They say it is made of cotton wool and grows upon trees, not like flax or hemp. But it was carried against the company though they stand out against the verdict. Okay, so I think essentially what Samuel Pepys is saying here, he was such a gossip. If you don't have a copy of his diary, I think it's out there. It's very cheap. You can get like just reprints. And some of it's kind of tough reading because he's written in the 1600s. It's not speaking modern vernacular English, but the things he says are so gossipy. And we know a lot because of his diary, you know, the fact that he wrote this stuff. But I think what he's saying is that this Martin Knoll farmer, so Martin Knoll is a farmer, and there's a dispute between him and the East India Company. The East India Company is trying to charge additional duty on this fabric, this calico. And he's saying, oh, it's made of linen, no additional duty. But they're saying, no, no, it's not. It's cotton. So there's a duty applied to it. So interesting. In America, Columbus not only found cotton growing, but he also found cloth that had already been woven by hand. Except Columbus didn't come to America. Columbus went to the islands. Okay. Cotton grew in abundance in Virginia, but it did not become important as a commodity until after the Revolution. There were two reasons for this. The first was the discouragement by England of any cotton industry that would compete with her own, meaning the East India Company's work with the cotton. And the second was that there was no way of removing the seeds from the boll because, well, there was a way of removing the seeds from the boll. You did it by hand. And it wasn't until Eli Whitney invented and patented the cotton gin that things really got rolling here in the States, right? All right. I'm going to end there. We'll be jumping into homespuns on Thursday. Oh, and I think my sticky note is no longer sticky. Okay. That's no good. There we go. Okay. A good exam question. You know what, you guys? I should put together a Cake TV exam and see how many of you can pass it. Of all of you that have been here for a long time and heard many of the books, I wonder how you do. I wonder how I would do. See, because you know, the people who cannot do teach, and I do come from an education background. All right, I am going to go for today, you guys. It is 4 o'clock my time. And yeah, the day is winding down. Thankfully, it is not getting dark at 4 p.m. anymore. We've actually got light. So, and I think it may not be negative whatever out there. So I might poke my head outside and see, maybe. So, all right, you guys, have a wonderful week. If you're in the snow, stay warm, stay safe. If you've got good weather, please enjoy it for me. And I will be back on Thursday, normal time. And I have some other cool stuff to show you that I've already starting to stack up. So I'll be doing a little bit more research this week while I'm visiting, and you'll get some details on Thursday. So take care, guys. If you follow me and Jill on Quilt Nerding, we'll be here YouTube tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern time, like normal. So I'll see you then. And if you don't follow us, I'll see you on Thursday. So take care, guys. Mwah! Bye!